All right, thank you. Third question is relations between the United States and Russia have worsened in recent years. How will your candidate approach this issue? Let's see, I'm trying to figure out where to start. How about with Jason and then go that way to Ken?
Okay, thanks. Well, I think the first thing that Secretary Clinton would say is, okay, if relations between the United States and Russia have worsened, and I doubt few people would care to disagree with that. I think the first thing we would say is, well, why have they worsened? You know, what changed? If you rewind the clock 5 years ago, relations between the United States and Russia were actually soaring. We had a new, young, idealistic president here in the United States, Barack Obama. We had a young, idealistic president in Russia named Medvedev. You know, we're reaching a point where it was almost puppies and rainbows in comparison to what we had seen from the Cold War days. So what happened? What changed? What caused this change in direction between relations with the United States and Russia? There's a lot of attention that gets paid in 2011 to the Arab Spring and the protests that took place there, and we'll get to those in more detail when we talk about Syria. But one thing that's probably not as widely known is that there were a lot of protests in Russia during that time. The parliamentary elections were widely perceived as corrupt, and the results were widely not accepted as legitimate. And as a result of that, there were widespread protests across Russia. Just as Medvedev was leaving the presidency and Vladimir Putin was returning to the presidency, he had to deal with a population that was protesting pretty vehemently, not just in Moscow, not just in major cities, but across the country. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see that if you look around the world at that same time and you see long-established authoritarian leaders succumbing to popular pressure due to protest, that might make you a little bit nervous. I'm not saying that Russia is an authoritarian regime. Although my friends in Russia, as they tell me every day, I have friends in Russia that I talk to on Facebook almost every day. They speak English, I don't speak Russian. But they're very keen to tell me that the government of Russia, while not an authoritarian government, it is more authoritarian than what we see in the United States or Europe. And the people of Russia prefer that, and that's their choice. So I think we need to recognize that Russia has legitimate security interests, not just in Ukraine. There was no specific question on Ukraine. But I bring it up because I think that's the point where things really started to go south between the United States and Russia, not just with Crimea, but also with the protests in Kiev, which caused the Ukrainian president to flee for safety to Russia, which again is virtually a president being overthrown by protest in Ukraine for Russia. They're knocking on your doorstep. So I can understand from Russia's perspective why that would make folks very nervous. What would Secretary Clinton do as president about restoring our relations to where they were in 2012, 2011? This is an issue, a security issue that is critical. It critically depends on diplomacy and diplomatic experience. This is a case where you want a person who is cool, who is level-headed, who's going to engage with Russian leaders and in a respectful way. What you don't want is a candidate that's going to just say something crazy and blow up the entire discussion, which in diplomacy can happen. We don't want to see that. So I think that this is an issue where diplomatic experience would be important. I don't know that Russia and the U.S. will ever reach a point where they really see eye to eye over Ukraine or Crimea or even Eastern Europe. But I think there's certainly room for relations to be improved. The Russian people are no enemy of the United States of America. Keep in mind, they did us a huge favor. They did something we couldn't do. They got rid of the Soviet Union. The people of Russia got rid of the Soviet Union. That's something we were unable to do after 50 years. So the Russian people are not our enemy. And I would submit to you that as President, Secretary Clinton would know that and it would base her diplomacy on it.
Thank you. Ken Mollman, Libertarian Party.
All right. So let me start right off the bat with, obviously right now we're having a proxy war with Russia in Syria. I mean, that's going on right now. The very first thing entertainingly, I'm sure those who have been following the campaigns, Governor Johnson messed up the name of the city Aleppo, involved in the Syrian civil war. Now, after you watch that clip and get a good laugh, immediately afterwards, when it's clarified that it's Syria, he has outlines exactly what needs to happen. We do need to begin negotiating and increasing diplomacy with Putin. The only way the Syrian mess ends is by working with Putin to come to an agreeable solution to stop the proxy war that we're having with Russia in Syria. If you guys aren't familiar with that, we're funding one side and giving them weapons, who then sneaks a few over to ISIS, which is entertaining because they're also our enemies, but whatever. And then the Russians come and they bomb all our guys because they're saying, well, we did that because they gave the weapons to ISIS. And so the point is that we've got this mess in Syria that is a direct result of not working well with the Russians, or I shouldn't say direct result. The reason it's happening is because of our foreign policy and regime change. But it's made worse, exacerbated by the fact that we don't have a good working relationship with Putin. We do need to increase diplomacy in that realm, and we need to work with people. Ideally, we'd like to talk to people before we start bombing. The Ukraine situation is definitely an interesting one. Behind it, a few steps back, the United States entered into an agreement with the Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union that we would protect Ukraine from the Russians if they were to invade, if they would give us their nuclear weapons. That's actually what happened. Ukraine gave us their nuclear weapons, and then when the Russians started tinkering with Ukraine, the Ukrainians were like, hey guys, remember that agreement from 20 years ago? Help. Now, whether we should have been in that or not, that's a whole other story. And as mentioned earlier, I'm more of a Jeffersonian libertarian, so I believe that you have free trade and goodwill towards all and entangling alliances with none. And I think that that's another example of that with the Ukraine, that we should not have committed to be their defense force. That at the end of the day, even 20 years ago, I don't think that there's any way we could foresee, 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future, would we practically be able to defend the Ukraine, much less would there be a government there that we would want to defend. And certainly, over the course of decades, things can change. Long story short, we need to work with Putin to reestablish a relationship with Russia. As mentioned, the Russian people, I have a good friend who goes to Russia all the time, the Russian people are not our enemy. It's more about, I will say it politely, I think it's more about the ego of the leadership than it is about the people that they claim to represent. And if we can get past that ego, if we can actually work together, I do think there can actually be a beneficial relationship there, generally.
Thank you. This is about relations between the United States and Russia. How will your candidate approach this issue, Bernadine Zenny, Green Party?
I can tell you what Jill has said, and what Jill has said is that Hillary is, Jason, the things that you're saying are great, but unfortunately your candidate has never said those things. Hillary's talk is very aggressive toward Putin. She said terrible things about him. She has said things that are not true about things that he's done, about Ukraine and about Crimea. And, you sound really reasonable. It sounded pretty good in some ways, except your candidate has never said them. And what Hillary has said is that she wants to enforce a no-fly zone over Syria, and we can go more into Syria when we talk about Syria, but this is about Russia. Russia, who is monitoring with planes, trying to protect some people that it cares about with planes, and Hillary has, wants to institute a no-fly zone. What that means, those planes will get shut down. So that means a war with Russia. A nuclear-armed country? Excuse me? What? So Hillary is, like I said, very tough on talk and very tough on action. And it scares me senseless to think about what would happen If we start getting into any kind of a war of aggression with Russia, which actually, Ken is actually right, there is a proxy war going on with Russia in Syria, and who's paying the price? Who always pays the price? The people. Women, children, Doctors Without Borders, hospitals, like 5 doctors were blown up. Oh, it was a mistake. Oh, sorry, mistake. What? Anyway, this aggressiveness towards other countries that is expressed by the U.S. and embodied in Hillary Clinton, it just has to stop. We live in a country and we live in a world where we have to get along with people. And one of the very first things that my candidate has said is that we've got to quit arming both sides. The only people that are profiting from all of this endless war are the arms manufacturers. And if you want to talk about Bush, do we all know that Prescott Bush sold weapons to the Nazis and to Germany before he wasn't? He did until he couldn't. So the whole wars of aggression, all wars of aggression, all wars are bankers' wars, they're arms dealers' wars, they're corporate wars. And the people always pay the price.
All right, thanks. TJ Benefik, 4 minutes. We're on the 4-minute one, right? Yes. On relations between the United States and Russia.
And they shall beat their swords into plows. Blessed are the peacemakers. You know, there is a lot of regret to be expressed for the way that the United States has handled Russia since the fall of the Soviet Empire. First, we had the jovial, grandfatherly Boris Yeltsin, and maybe a lot of world leaders, including President Clinton, didn't take Yeltsin serious. They got a man now that you better take serious, because he's a serious dude. And he's not going to deal with anybody that he doesn't respect. And Russia, frankly, in many instances, deserves more respect than she gets in the world of nations. Russia is one of the most fascinating nations on earth. It's where East meets West. If you look at the grand Russian tradition going back to Peter the Great, to the Tsar, to Stalin, and up to Vladimir Putin, they want a strong man. It's in their DNA. They don't have the same thoughts on democracy as we do. They want a strong leader. They want a strong man. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin can be partners in peace and in a better tomorrow, I think, for the whole world. And it is scary. It's very scary to think of Hillary Clinton as our commander-in-chief trying to deal with a Vladimir Putin that does not respect her because she doesn't respect him. And there's no greater there's no greater area where there is so much work to be done than in U.S.-Russian relations. We have got to press the reset button. You remember Hillary took the Staples reset button with Medvedev, and they had all that, but everybody knew that he was just going to be a seat warmer, and then Vlad would be coming back, and that's obviously what happened. But, and you know, there's some nasty, nasty things that happen in these former Soviet states, in the little nations, in the Baltic states and all that. But you know what? They're not the United States' quarrel. And we cannot expend our blood and treasure on that. And it goes back to once again establishing an America First foreign policy that's going to put our sons, our daughters, our nation first, and not be the world's police force or rescue squad.
All right.